Hi, my name is Lawrence Linker. I'm the co-founder and CEO of XD Academy. I've gathered great friends here today to talk about crypto.
We are seeing a lot of interest from different financial institutions issuing a stablecoin.
To me, it's the next evolution of digital cash.
The beauty and the challenge of decentralized finance is that there are no such checks, right?
As long as the organization is in control, it's great.
It's a good thing. It just should not be the only kind of stable coins that people can have access to.
It's starting to sound like maybe the best thing is for the central banks themselves to just issue a digital currency.
They're betting that they can't. After all, they're rivals.
We pop like the Crisco, got rich off the crypto. I'm winning again, you can like it or not.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Linker. I'm the co-founder and CEO of XD Academy. I build crypto education experiences that are just like the ones I wish that I had had when I started working in crypto and didn't really know anything. But one of the things that helped me most was just having friendly conversations with people who had experience in the industry and could help me understand some of the things that I had questions about. I wanted to bring that experience to you guys, and so I've organized this podcast series to talk to some of the smartest people that I know. Today I have with me Sherry, Ivan, and Daniel. Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm now the head of Web3 for Banking Circle. We are an European bank that is licensed in Luxembourg, and our branches are supervised by the FCA in the UK, by BaFin in Germany, and the Denmark FSA in Copenhagen. We clear about 10-12% of e-commerce flow in Europe. And recently, we have actually moved into the Web3 space to support the various crypto firms in terms of fiat services.
There's a reason that you would be selected to lead the Web3 for Banking Circle. Maybe tell us a little bit about your journey with crypto before Banking Circle.
Well, before that, I spent 22 years in DBS. In my last role in DBS was I was the head of business and listing for the DBS Digital Exchange. So the DBS Digital Exchange was something that I proposed to DBS in 2018, where we decided to set up a crypto and security token exchange. Right. So how I got into this space was at a point in time around 2017. I was the head of electronic trading. And a lot of my clients were the high-frequency market makers. They were moving to cryptos around 2017. So they were the ones that brought me into this space. And around 2018, that was the time when I thought that I should give a proposal to DBS to set up an exchange. I brought it up to my immediate boss, who thought it was a great idea, but he thought that it would be difficult for us to sell this to the board. In DBS, for such a new initiative, you need the sponsorship of one of the business unit heads. So there's 4 business unit heads within DBS, consumer banking, institutional banking, treasury, and capital markets. So I knew that at the point in time in 2018, if I were to call a meeting on cryptocurrencies, it just won't happen, right? So what I did was I waited for the head of capital markets at the lift lobby in MBFC.
And just to be clear, because we probably have an international audience,
yeah.
DBS is the Development Bank of Singapore, which is the biggest bank of Singapore, and MBFC is the headquarters. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I waited for the head of capital markets, and when I saw her, I did my pitch, right? So I started off with security tokens and then moving to cryptos, and I just had the time from the lobby to her office on the 44th floor of MBFC.
A true elevator pitch.
Literally.
Yeah.
Elevator pitch.
And then she basically told me to write her a paper, and then we circulated that paper. Obviously, initially, there were a lot of opposition. Eventually, the paper went on to a senior advisor of the bank. This is Eric Ang was an old-time banker in DBS. He spent his whole career in DBS, and he stayed on as advisor to the bank. And he asked to discuss this proposal with me. We spent about 2 hours together, and in the end, he thinks that this is something we should do. And that's how it all started. So we built this exchange in stealth mode from 2018 all the way to 2020. and then we launched it in around December 2020.
Amazing. So I think globally now, maybe thanks partially to like Crazy Rich Asians, but like everyone's heard of Singapore now, and people know Singapore as sort of this like financial mecca of Asia. And DBS is the biggest bank in Singapore. And so we're very privileged, in my opinion, to be talking to the guy who really pioneered digital assets within DBS Bank. So I think this is such an interesting experience and perspective you're bringing to the table, Daniel, and I'm really happy to have you with us here today. Ivan?
So my name is Ivan. I lead content at Request Finance. Request Finance is one of the largest B2B crypto payments players today. We launched in January of 2021, and since then we've done over $300 million worth of crypto payroll, invoices, as well as expenses for about 2,000 Web3 teams like MakerDAO, The Sandbox, Aave, Decentraland, and a few others.
Great.
Yeah, well, actually, I first got into crypto in 2015 when I wanted to buy medicine off the internet. And that's where I realized.
So in medicine, I don't know if we want to talk about that. I think many of us started buying medicine off the crypto end, but like,
So I think specifically, so I've got a skin condition called eczema.
Oh,
Yeah. And so I need to take antihistamines. And in Singapore, actually, they're surprisingly expensive if you get them at 7-Eleven or at Guardian. Like any one of those over-the-counter pharmacies. They can be anywhere from like $6.60 a pill to $2 a pill, right? Which is like just an antihistamine. There's nothing special about this.
So why do you need to use crypto to buy antihistamines?
So in India, where it's actually produced, it's a generic drug, right? So it's 16 cents a pill. And back then, some of these online pharmacies in India were like, we have trouble getting the payment service providers like PayPal to basically service us. And if you use this thing called Bitcoin to pay us, not only is it cheaper, we'll give you 20% off your entire, 20 to 50%, depending on how much you offer.
And this is totally legal.
Totally legal. Yeah. So I'm not talking about the illicit substances, but actually, so almost like Bitcoin as God intended, right? Like a pure system of global cash. And that's what motivated me to buy my first Bitcoin back in 2015. And that's why I started a Coinbase account, actually. Because I was like, that sounds cool. Like I want cheap medicine, and Bitcoin's a way to do that, right?
I love hearing everybody's conversion story. I'll share mine at some point, but I haven't shared it actually publicly ever to this point. But I will share it. It's very personal. But okay, so go on. So Request Finance, you guys are payroll providers.
That's right.
For crypto companies dealing mostly with stablecoins. So we want to really explore today.
60% of our transaction volume is in stablecoins, specifically like US dollar stablecoins, but we've also got like Sing dollar stablecoins as well as like Euro stablecoins.
Okay.
And so what we really do is to automate some of the payment processing around that, as well as financial reporting for teams.
Got it. So help me understand. So let's say like if I'm running like a DAO that has like a lot of people that I need to pay. That's right. Why would I need you? Why can't I just like batch my transactions myself?
Yeah, so there's a great example of this that happened recently, earlier this month in, I think, 6th of March. So People DAO, the DAO that tried to buy a copy of the Constitution, they got hacked, right? Because so a lot of DAOs and a lot of companies, they manage their crypto payroll using like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet.
Yeah.
So you got a list of names, a list of wallet addresses.
Right.
Now, so what the hacker got access to that Google sheet.
Oh no.
That's right. And he added himself.
Oh
as an employee. And guess what? His pay for that month was 76.5 ETH, which is about 120 grand. Right?
Yeah.
And then, and the quorum of the signers in the multi-sig wallet, the multi-signature wallet, was there at 9 signers. So 9 authorized signatories.
Yeah.
And of those, 6 just looked at the list. It was like 80 rows, right? And they were just like, okay.
But how would you know, right? Like, how would you ever say, like,
hit sign, and then they were like, 76.5 ETH. That doesn't sound right. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we exist. And that's to allow a lot of the Web3 CFOs as well as like DAO managers or accountants to securely automate some of these payment processes.
Great. I'm so excited to have you here, Ivan. This is a really great story. Sherry, tell us about you.
Yeah, I'm Sherry. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bluejay Finance. We're like a crypto fintech. So we build stable coins for Asia currencies, but then we also build products that utilize those stable coins as well. So on the stablecoin side, the first one that we actually launched, which was at the end of last year, is the Sing Dollar. So it is a synthetic currency that is pegged to the Singapore dollar that you can use around Ethereum. And we actually launched also this last quarter our product called Bluejay Earn, which is the first use case for BlueSGD, our SGD stablecoin, which will allow anybody around the world to be able to earn yield that is actually backed by real world assets. Now, this might be a term that might not be as familiar for those who aren't following everything in crypto, but real world assets is basically the space where you kind of take real kind of private debt or other assets in traditional finance and bring them onto the blockchain to allow people to actually invest using assets like stablecoins. So there's a couple of problems that we want to solve with Bluejay. I think number one is access to finance, particularly for people or businesses that have traditionally been left out of the system. So that includes around, I think, $500 billion of capital in terms of credit gap for SMEs just in Southeast Asia. On the investment side of things,
why are these people why are they left out of the system? Why can't?
Yeah, well, actually, I think Daniel will maybe know a bit more as well, coming from the banking world. But when it comes to, let's say, credit as an example, right? It's very, very hard to service every single opportunity out there, right? So you have SMEs or startups that, let's say, are doing ESG or doing some kind of B2B fintech kind of company, right? There's certain, I would say, markets within Southeast Asia where maybe the institution might be a little bit more old school or conservative, right? Where they're used to business models like, real estate, but they may not necessarily understand some of the new tech companies, right? They see it as risk. So it's a lot more profitable, I think, to take maybe the types of loans and opportunities that you've seen decades after decades. But to see something new, it's a little bit higher risk. So you may not necessarily fill that kind of role. And so that's why there's a huge space of alternative lenders, even within Southeast Asia, trying to fill this kind of gap. So I guess to give an example, right? There's I think the ESG space is actually a really interesting one. So again, very revenue generating, profit generating business. If you're like a full solar farm, you basically get your revenues from people that are kind of using it, paying utility bills essentially. But if you don't understand a tech, right, as a bank, you may not necessarily be as keen to kind of fund this kind of opportunity. So there's a lot of interesting projects, including guys like us that are looking to kind of bring these opportunities to anybody who wants to earn interest on them or earn something that's a higher yield than just fixed deposit or, a risk-free bank savings rate.
Okay.
And the way that you do it is through stablecoins. So that's the linkage between these products and then stablecoins. You have to have these stable assets to be able to invest in these products on the blockchain.
Yes, I know that all of you have a connection to stablecoins, which is why we're here today. I want to talk specifically about stablecoins. I guess the main thing that made me think it's time to do something about stablecoins is, obviously stablecoins are a huge part of the crypto world today. I think almost anybody who's really doing business in crypto is using stablecoins. If you're sort of a casual retail crypto investor, maybe you own some Bitcoin, maybe you own some Ethereum, you might not have a need for stablecoins. But if you're doing business in crypto, for sure you have stablecoins. This includes me. And a few weeks ago, we had a situation where one of the largest stable coins, USD coin, issued by Circle, started to depeg a little bit, right? And it caused a lot of concern for a lot of people, including myself, right? Because we have a good portion of our treasury in USD coin, and I'm really concerned right now, especially after what we've seen happen to some other stable coins in the past, right? So I want to explore all of these topics today. But firstly, what is a stable coin? We're talking to our parents here, right? Your parents might be smart. I don't know. Imagine we're talking to somebody who maybe understands the very fundamental basics of how blockchain works, right? A little bit about crypto. But now what is a stable coin?
It's actually really funny because I was explaining what I do and what all this means to my mother actually just like a month or two ago. My mother actually does trading, so she's like, I mean, she's not a professional trader, but she, you know, she follows the markets. She does invest a lot herself, not so much in crypto, but the way I actually describe a stablecoin is not actually the way people traditionally describe one. I actually started out with, think about your Fidelity brokerage account where you have a bunch of your investments, right? You can kind of purchase different ETFs, you can buy bonds, things like that, right? It's a central account. But what you don't know is basically the dollars in Fidelity are like Fidelity dollars, right? They're basically on Fidelity's ledger system. It's private, right? You don't see it publicly, but it's a reflection of your kind of, I guess, ownership or what kind of assets you have invested in there. Now, imagine if Fidelity were on a public blockchain like Ethereum, right? You need to have digital dollars or digital currencies to allow you to invest in these different opportunities. Then that's what a stablecoin effectively is.
So what you're saying is basically, as a model for thinking about stablecoin, if I think about like my brokerage account, and I have some like cash position there, my cash position at Fidelity or whatever could be thought of as like a stable coin, right? Because it's not sort of I don't own the actual dollars anyway, right? Daniel, you look skeptical. Do you have a different view on this?
No, okay, for me, how I would explain it more my dad is a remiser. So he would understand traditional finance. So I'll bring
that is a what? Sorry?
A remiser.
What's that?
It's a old word for broker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So basically, he would understand TradFi, right? So if you bring it into the context of ETF, it's actually quite easy to understand what a stablecoin is. So like when you do any ETF, it's basically three types of ETF. You can fully replicate an ETF. So if you want to fully replicate it, you just buy all the underlying, which the ETF is supposed to represent. Number two, you can do a sampling. So instead of, say, buying the entire 100 basket that you want to replicate, you do a statistics that, you can buy 50 of the basket and it's enough to replicate the performance of the underlying. And the last one would be synthetically replicating it, whether through swap base, etc., right? And I think stablecoins is very much that way, right? You have the fiat-based type stablecoins where you are going to just replicate them one for one, right? So that's very simple to understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Guys, sorry. Let me just, I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who really doesn't know much here. And I feel like this person is like about to tune out, right? What is a stablecoin? In the simplest possible terms, what is a stablecoin? If I don't know anything about crypto, you tell me, what's a stablecoin?
Like, I think the simplest way I would put it, it's a digital dollar, right? It, to me, is the next evolution of digital cash. So I think a lot of us, especially if we were born in the 90s, saw this transition from analog to digital in many aspects of life. And one of those things was actually digital banking, right? I remember somewhere in 2014, when I was still in college, there was this big push in Singapore to go cashless. And they were pushing us to not accept physical cash transactions like banknotes and use this thing called like Pay Now, which is an instant payment that we have in Singapore, right? So the idea was like, keep your banknotes, deposit them in a bank account. We'll represent those on the digital ledger, right? That shows up as an account value. And you can use those digital dollars to transact with anyone in Singapore who has a digital account as well. So I see stablecoins basically like the next evolution of those digital dollars. The difference between what we have today in terms of digital payments like Venmo, like Pay Now, or like Google Pay is that imagine if that was a global system. Because I can't pay now someone in the US.
Anywhere outside of Singapore.
Anywhere outside of Singapore, except Malaysia, Thailand, and India now. Right?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Pay Now works in those countries?
That's right.
Pay Now works, I think, directionally
bilaterally.
Unilaterally.
But it doesn't work between the country, like India and Thailand. But
it's
works.
bilateral. So that means like I can send it. I can pay someone in Thailand. Someone in Thailand can pay to me.
Yeah.
I can do the same with someone in India. But the guy in India and Thailand
can't pay to each other. Oh, wow. Singapore is so smart. Okay.
But so imagine a stable
So the
coins
guy in
were
India sends it to him, and he sends it.
So you become the money. You become the money. changer,
Come to money chain.
Yeah.
You take a spread. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Maybe the answer I was looking for. I guess.
And easy to understand.
I guess the way I would explain it is like a stablecoin is basically it's a cryptocurrency representation of a normal currency, of a fiat currency.
Exactly.
Right.
It's tokenized money.
It's tokenized
That's
money, right? Yeah, that's it, right? I think it's good to start from there because then I do want to go into some of the stuff that you were talking about, Daniel, right? Which are like the different ways that stablecoins are created, the implications of that in terms of safety, et cetera, right? Okay, so if I want to tokenize money, right, and anybody could do it, right? We haven't seen a stablecoin come from like a government or anything yet, but we have these companies that say, hey, this currency that I issue, this is worth $1. This token is worth $1, right? How does somebody validate that assertion?
So if you talk about tokenized money, right? So a tokenized deposit is technically sort of like e-money, right? It's not really a stable coin yet. Right? So an e-money difference is that it's usually in a closed loop ecosystem, right? And it exists in usually ledgers that's controlled by a financial institution. The difference for a stable coin is that it is similar, right? It's backed by something. It's backed by either a deposit of fiat, is backed by some sort of collateral. It could be crypto assets like what Bluejay does, right? It could be fiat, it could be it could be T-bills, it could be fiat equivalent, right? But what it does is that it exists not in a private ledger, but in a public ledger. So it exists actually in a public blockchain. So it's something that you can actually send it around. So if you think about e-money, you can actually only use it within the ecosystem of that financial institution. But so if I were to send you some e-money that's been issued by DBS or OCBC, you have to be within that same ecosystem to receive it, right? But for stablecoins, because it exists in a public ledger, public blockchain, it basically allows you to move money to anyone. So you can actually move that money to someone that's outside a specific ecosystem.
And that and doesn't that create some problems sometimes? There are situations where we want to control who's able to sort of send and receive money, right?
Like KYC, AML and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, so typically I would say when there is a point where that money exits the ecosystem, right? Like goes through like an exchange or goes through like, I don't know, guys like StraightX that do on and off ramp via their stablecoin, they have those checks in place, right? AML, compliance, all of that, right? Now, the beauty and the challenge of decentralized finance on the Ethereum blockchain is that there are no such checks, right? If you are using a popular product called Uniswap, which is a decentralized automated market maker, and for those who are not familiar with that, it basically means it's an exchange where anybody can kind of like list assets and trade them. There is no process for you to, assert what your identity is. You can't verify whether or not you are, a money launderer or a terrorist, right? But you can kind of go use it. But as soon as that money exits the ecosystem through like exchanges, that's where those checks are put in place. So I think it's the beauty as well as, some of the challenges, right, related to like the stable coins and at least a DeFi kind of landscape.
Why stable coins? What's the point of stable coins? If we're replacing the monetary system, if Bitcoin and these Ethereum are supposed to be better than dollars and pounds and whatever other currency, why are we replicating the old system with the new technology?
Well, I think it's because like a lot of your traditional cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they don't actually quite function as currency just yet. Right, because economists talk about the three functions of money, right? You got a store of value, a unit of count, and a medium of exchange, right? So maybe store of value and medium of exchange that might be fine, but it doesn't serve very well as a unit of account because the way I explain it is this, right? If we go out for beers or buy pizza and we want to split the bill, we typically don't do that in Apple shares, right? You know, and there's a good reason for that. And that's the same reason I think we don't use Bitcoin or Ethereum as much in most payments today. So a lot of things are still referenced in national currencies or fiat currencies. And I think that's why stablecoins are valuable, because they have all the benefits of blockchain-based currencies without a lot of the downsides of more volatile cryptocurrencies.
I want to add on to Ivan's point a little bit here is that, you know, regardless of like what your philosophical beliefs are, like whether or not you want to have Bitcoin as that primary denomination, the reality today is that when you look at your share of wallet, like when you are, you know, going and buying dinner, or when you're like paying your car servicer or your landlord for rent, like you are using the currency in that country, like most of the time, like 99.9% of the time, right? So it's unavoidable that you are still denominating your own wealth and your own kind of, you know, I guess, unit of account in that currency. So until we, you know, move to a world where, you know, so much of commerce is denominated in Bitcoin and people start using that as a base, I don't think that stable coins will suddenly become obsolete, right? Sure. So yeah, it is this irony where like, yes, like I would say like blockchain as a technology is looking to kind of revolutionize what we have in the traditional world, but the unit of account itself still needs to reflect something that makes economic sense to the day-to-day user.
I mean, the other thing is that in this whole blockchain world, you also have different transfer of real-world assets, whether it's NFT representing a building, representing a membership to a club. You need to pay for it with something. So if you're following the traditional fiat, you have to follow traditional banking hours. But as you know, in blockchain, it works 24/7, right? That's when stablecoin would be able to help support this kind of infrastructure. So if I'm going to transfer something to you on a Saturday, the banks might be closed. It doesn't allow me to effect that transfer as efficiently. So what will happen then is that if I'm using a stablecoin, it runs on the same blockchain, and the ability for me to do it, delivery versus payment, become a lot easier.
Maybe I'll just put to you guys, like the biggest stable coin in the world, I think, is USDT.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes. As of now, yes.
As of now,
Yes.
right?
It changes around a little bit, but
What do we know about USDT? Like, how is it? Why do people use USDT?
Good question.
well, I mean, they were one of the first to market actually in 2014, right after like Nubits.
Yeah.
USD.
Yeah.
After BitUSD.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think one of the real reason why it's being used now is sort of, for argument's sake, a lot of people still think that USDC is a lot safer, more transparent. Yeah. But I think what you're looking at is the risk, the regulatory risk in the US, right? So it's sort of ironic, but the thing is that if you have a less US nexus, you technically have a less of a regulatory risk.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So you are actually giving up some transparency for a reduced regulatory risk. So, and I think because of the risk of regulation from the US is quite high at the moment, that's why there's this focus on USDT.
Yeah.
As opposed to USDC, which is
even though it's more transparent, you know that the
Right.
assets being kept at BlackRock, etc. Right?
Okay, got it. Okay, how much do you guys know about like the origin of USDT, how it came about, where did it come from? I mean, this is a stable coin that I think all of us have used. All of us, it's certainly a big part of all of our lives. I'm just curious, like how much do we know about USDT?
So, I mean, they do have attestation reports like other stable coins, right? So they do state the breakdown of their reserves, although there's some questions about the reliability of those reports. But in general, I would say that it's actually not too far off from, it's maybe slightly riskier than what USDC has done in terms of like the balance of the composition of the balance of their holdings. But I don't think it's that much different.
What is the composition?
So all stablecoin issuers have some level of cash held in a bank, which they don't actually like deploy, and they have also short dated T-bills or US Treasury bills. And I think they have something like Circle, something like
It's like 16%.
16%, 16.5% or something like that in cash. And I think USDT has like something like
It's usually between like 10 to 20%.
I think it's 12% or something like
Right.
that.
So this is the business model, right?
That's
so like
right.
if I want to start a stable coin,
Yeah.
and let's say I want to do it sort of responsibly,
Yeah.
right? The easiest thing for me is I collect all this money from people.
Yes.
I buy treasuries with it.
Yes.
Then I can issue the stable coin, and it's all backed up by these treasuries, which are highly liquid. If I need to sell them, I can sell them at a very good price
Yes.
quickly if I need to. And I'm earning some small amount of interest from the treasuries, right? So it's not a huge interest rate, but if I collect enough money, it's a meaningful amount,
Yeah.
right? So is this the same? Is this the model for all of the stable coins?
It's the model for most of the centralized or the fiat-based stable coins, right? And to be honest, like they actually operate just like any kind of like depository bank, right? You have a certain reserve that you keep in cash, but then the rest of it you're kind of using in other kind of interest-bearing opportunities, right? I would say that when you look at the non-centralized stable coins, I mean, you do have a little bit more I guess, diversity of revenue streams for making money. So one I'll actually mention here is actually when you're a decentralized stablecoin and you actually own the liquidity on certain like decentralized exchanges where your own stablecoins being traded, right? So you're effectively like a market maker, right? You actually can earn the swap fees that are happening when somebody wants to trade in and out of your currency. That is something that I would say most of the centralized stablecoins will not do, at least with the money that is sitting with the stablecoins, right? They have a separate arm that is trading and making that revenue. That's also possible, right? But at least the stablecoin business itself wouldn't necessarily be deploying into the pools where the stablecoins would be traded.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're saying about what we know, but I mean, the whole vision of the founder in 2014 was to address the pain point that most of the crypto firms had, which was the difficulty of accessing banking rails. Right?
Yeah.
And that was his vision, right?
Or, I mean, also, I mean, from a retail investor perspective, right? Like using Bitcoin as a base currency to trade on a centralized exchange isn't like always the best experience. Or you want to like actually keep when you're exiting in and out of trades, you want to hold something that doesn't like, go up and down 50% in a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, USDT actually really served that need. And I mean, because they were quite early to the market, right? Like, remember, like, I don't think Circle really started growing until maybe like 2017, 2018. They had all those years to form those relationships with the exchanges, right? And get in as the like base trading pair. Yeah. So it's also solving that need from a I guess, retail trader perspective as well.
Yeah. Guys, I feel like we've gotten a really good introduction now about stable coins, kind of what are stable coins, how are stable coins used, how each of us use stable coins in our respective businesses. I'd like to hear a little bit about what you think the future of stable coins might look like. Are we going to see some innovations in that area?
I think one of the things that you might see that would drive a lot of new stable coins, it's the market in crypto assets regulations or directive in Europe, MiCA, where they would define different stable coins as e-money tokens and asset reference token. So e-money tokens is basically a stable coin that's going to be backed by a single fiat currency. Whereas an asset reference token could be backed by a basket of currency, for example, or other types of collateral. So as it is now in Europe, we are seeing a lot of interest from different financial institutions, electronic money institutions that are actually looking at issuing a stable coin, right? And we as a bank has been asked to be a reserve bank for this type of stable coins. And that is what we are working with a few proposals with a few institutions then intending to launch stable coins under MiCA, where we would be acting as the reserve manager.
Very cool. Ivan, what do you see coming down?
So one of the things I'm looking out for is how do stablecoins compete with instant payment systems like FedNow, Pix in Brazil, or UPI in India, or PayNow in Singapore? And to me, I think at the retail level, like stablecoins need to offer two main things. One is that they need to be, so instant payment systems are really fast and fee-free, at least domestically, right? It costs me nothing. I can send money to you instantly to your mobile phone. Where I think stablecoins will stand out, even in comparison to these very efficient domestic payment rails, is if you think about, for example, all the loyalty programs that you don't use today, or they're incredibly convoluted to use, like air miles, like loyalty reward programs, even like reward programs at your boba tea shop, right? All of these things can be made programmatic and attached to spending in stablecoins. So I think programmatic loyalty rewards are going to be an interesting area that will drive the adoption of stablecoins and probably displace some of those existing digital payment rails. The other thing that I think is pretty interesting is almost like what Sherry's doing with Bluejay Earn, right? Stablecoins offer access to DeFi platforms that can give you higher yields in a much more efficient way. So I could deploy my stablecoins into almost like a digital wallet where it's like a savings wallet, and I can deploy it to T-bills or any other capital market instrument and exit out of that position very quickly. And then I can earn a far, far higher yield than I can with my digital dollars sitting in my PayNow wallet or my bank. So I think programmatic loyalty rewards as well as better access to fixed income instruments or other capital market instruments, those are going to be the things that would cause people to say, hey, even though I have instant payment rails, stable coins are going to be more attractive.
Interesting. Okay. Sherry, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the piece that I would like to add on to is the movement from stablecoins as, I guess, an asset for like trading and speculation to really these like real world use cases, right? And there's a term again used a lot, which is like real world assets, but it's really where we're seeing a ton of like, I guess, attention, a lot of excitement as well. You hear about guys like Goldfinch, Maple Finance, Credix, where they're really like taking, the crypto rails and just making the process of capital allocation just like so much more efficient. So allowing like any kind of business or person allow them to borrow capital from any person around the world and just make it kind of move a lot more efficiently. And so that's what I'm super excited about. I think from a macro level, if you just look at like the credit gap for SMEs, it's a $5 trillion opportunity that's not being addressed right now. It's a gap. So I look forward to seeing more and more of these opportunities being financed because you have different protocols, different credit protocols that are using stablecoins to allow these investments to be possible.
Yeah. I think one of the things that Sherry did point out that's missing in the discussion of payments is we don't have a truly global economy today. And I know that sounds like, oh, what do you mean, right? We've got e-commerce, I can buy stuff of Alibaba or Taobao, right? Well, no, I think at the start of COVID in particular, that's when we got our first taste of a truly global economy with remote work, right? And I think one of the things, at least what we're seeing at Request Finance, is that you have, for the first time in human history, this has never happened before, a new generation of people who are working for global companies from day one. And these companies are born global, right? You don't start off as a local company, then become regional, and then become global. No, like you're global from day one, right? Your developer is in India, your graphic designer is in the Philippines, your business development manager sits in Singapore. That's never happened before. Yeah. And cross-border payments are one of the biggest challenges for banking rails today, at least corresponding to banking rails, right? So I think with a global form of money, you will start to see the emergence of global teams and really global commerce, right? And I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about with stablecoins today.
I think what he said about the stablecoins being used to, let's say, maybe replace correspondent banking rails is very interesting, but I think it's still very difficult at this point in time. So like, for example, at this point in time, if you were to pass me some euros and ask me to send it to US, right? I would do the FX. I would use a correspondent bank like JP Morgan, So let's say you're in Europe now, you gave me euros, I changed it to US dollar, I use JP Morgan or somebody, BNY, as a correspondent bank to help me send it to the US. Now we're talking about replacing the correspondent bank with stable coins, right? So if I walk through the whole process, so what happens is that you give me euros, I do the FX, I get US dollar, I buy a stable coin. Now I use the stable coin, I transfer it over to the US. I go to the person and ask them, okay, I burned this coin, you give me back the US dollar, and I need you to send it to this person.
Yeah.
He will say, I can't send it to a third party. I will send it back to you.
Yes.
And which means he will send back to my account with my correspondent bank. So the correspondent bank comes in the circle again, and I use the correspondent bank to send it to the third party. So at this point in time, because of how the structure is in banking and also different regulation, it makes it practically very difficult. I hope to see all this friction disappear, but that is one of the difficulties that I see in using stable coins to try to replace a correspondent bank.
This very John Lennon idea of like your, business developer in Singapore and your, product manager in India working with your engineer in Brazil or whatever, right? We forget that there are restrictions to some of this type of stuff, right? We need to be careful about, technologies that enable people to go around the restrictions. Doesn't just because you can't evade the law doesn't mean that what you're doing is legal.
So actually, are you familiar with like Deal and Gusto?
No.
So they're payroll companies that basically allow you to hire out of a local entity and still, so you're not actually going around local labor law, but you're just hiring everyone as a contract.
Interesting.
Yeah, you're still paying their social security, or in Singapore we call it CPF. Yeah.
So these problems are being solved as well.
Right.
That's awesome, man.
So
That's fantastic.
It is you're not going to enter this dystopia where everyone's a contractor, everyone's a gig worker. No, that's not good. No.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And I guess from my experience with now, thankfully USDC has regained its peg, so I swapped out into Ethereum, which of course I was nervous about because my bills are in dollars.
Yeah.
And Ethereum obviously, floats against the dollar. Somehow Ethereum went up in the time that USDC seemed like it was in a shady place. So I actually made money in this whole situation.
Nice.
I swapped back into USDC once it seemed like everything was okay. Yeah, we could have just kind of talked about this whole situation more. I would always feel nervous, because for me, like if I have my dollars in a bank, right? I have to really, really trust the bank, and I have to really, really trust the issuer of the currency, right?
Yeah.
Because in some cases, it represents, I think like most people, I have years of work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sitting in a bank account.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Those are years I could have slept in every day, right?
Yeah.
That I didn't.
Yeah.
That are in the bank account. Like I just, it seems like such a nightmare. It's such an extreme scenario. Like I'm not saying that the issuers or any of these stable coins aren't like the most reputable, wonderful people, but how do we get to a place where we just really have no questions whatsoever about the safety of our money?
I think the structure that you would need for the reserve needs to be bankruptcy remote.
Yes.
That becomes very important.
That's right.
You need to have some sort of structure where it doesn't depend on the financial institution's balance sheet, but you have a structure where it's completely ring-fenced.
Yeah.
So that is something that we actually work with some of the institutions that intends to launch stablecoins. For example, in Europe, we have structures that are similar to a trust. So like in Europe, it's a civil law. So trust, equity and trust is a common law concept. So you would have things like fiduciary estate, which is completely ring-fenced from the balance sheet of a bank. And you can actually keep the money in this structure. Right? So in keeping it in such a structure, it actually ring fence those money. Right? And what you do then is that you then have further protection. Like, for example, you then do not lend out this money. This money is then put with a central bank within Europe. And it is, so effectively, what you're thinking is European Central Bank counterparty risk, right? Which is as safe as you can get.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
And even better if you can replicate that across multiple jurisdictions. So like you have different counterparties like the ECB, the US Treasury, the Singapore government.
It's starting to sound like maybe the best thing is for the central banks themselves to just issue a digital currency.
If they could all get their act together. But we're betting that they can't. And it's very likely that they can't because, after all, they're rivals. The BIS chiefs were saying that, we should have a unified programmable ledger. I'm skeptical of that because, well, put Russia, China, and the US in a room. Tell them to come up with a joint central bank digital currency.
No, but I also think that CBDC is very good for like remittances.
Oh, yeah.
And there is certain use cases for it. But if you're using it purely to replace money, there are also problems with it. So let's say you think about CBDC as a programmable money, right? And it works perfectly when the good government is included.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
So if you see a bad actor, you can actually turn off his money, right? You can do sanctions a lot easier.
Yes.
But what if, in a worst case scenario, a coup happened, someone takes over the government, he has full control over it.
Burma.
So now you are a rebel trying to fight back this, get back the government, right?
Bank account goes to zero.
Turns off your bank account. You have no more ability to buy weapons, you have no more ability to organize yourself. Right. So those are real risks as well, right? But it's not thought through, right?
It seems to me it's hard to have both, right? Yeah. Where you either say, because I thought your example was so interesting of basically like ECB counterparty risk, right? That's the ideal situation, right? But we don't want the ECB digital euro.
No, so what happens is that we are not we are talking about a specific country government controlling programmable money.
Right.
Yes.
Right. As opposed to, if your money was the MAS, was whoever, right? Sure. You are happy with that counterparty risk. But now what we are talking about is a money being issued by this organization that is fully controlled by by a centralized organization, which means that as long as the organization is in control, it's great. But what if in an extreme situation of war, an extreme situation of a coup, someone takes over this government?
Yeah.
They have full control over those money.
Or just a fiscally responsible government.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Venezuela, Argentina.
Yeah. So, by the way, I realized we probably didn't define what CBDCs were for the audience.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to define it?
I mean, essentially, so CBDC stands for central bank digital currencies. And the way that you can think about it is it's essentially it's a stable coin that is being issued by the government itself, but you have to think about it a little bit differently than private stable coins or decentralized ones because they're actually being fully controlled by the government. So essentially, if you're using like a Singapore dollar CBDC and you're doing some, things with it that they don't like, they can freeze your account. They can put quotas on how much you could spend with alcohol a month if they decide that it's a moral hazard for people to be drinking too much, right? So there's that, I guess, that potential threat of that control because it's still being controlled by a centralized actor versus when you think about, I guess, stable coins from a DeFi perspective, like the decentralization element is very core to it. Yeah. Now, I guess my view on CBDCs is that I think that, it's a good thing. It just should not be the only kind of stable coins that people can have access to, right? I think there could be some huge benefits in, for example, like, welfare distribution in certain countries, in tax, like paying taxes, right? Like just making some government payments just like way more efficient, I think it makes a lot of sense. Cross-border, maybe interbank settlement, right? But I do think that there is definitely still a space where like there is money that should be created that is apart from government interests as well, because you don't want a situation where any and all money is now under the purview of one actor who may be compromised by political interests at some point.
Which is such an interesting thought, right? All of our lives, money and government have always been like the same thing, right? The idea of a non-government issued money is it's both very old and very new, right?
It's a paradigm shift for sure, but like if you ask ourselves why that's the case, it's because of, I don't know if you know something called baseline theory, but like what you accept as reality is the reality that you were born into, right? I mean, for a long time, I mean, money has been in the control of the government. Like even think about like even back in like feudalism, right? Like you had 30%, 40% taxes on peasants, but that's because that's what the king wanted, right? And in certain places, the baseline theory is that the government controls the flow of information too, like it controls media. But if you live in a country like the US, you're like, that's absolutely not true, right? Information is freely on the internet. Like that's not in control of the government. I don't think there's anything fundamental about government having to control all aspects of money. And I think we're seeing that starting to unravel a little bit right now. And I think that scares a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because it is so different than how we've operated for the longest time.
Yeah.
The other point, fiat money is also relatively new.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, because not too long ago that you have the gold standard.
Gold, bullion.
Commodity back.
And I guess when you had the gold standard, you could say actually gold was really the money.
It was.
Right?
Until it became impractical, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, like that period lasted like several hundred years. It was the first era of globalization, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the colonial empires and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's super interesting.
Yeah. So it's like the idea of fiat money and like the fact that we're just born into this era where we see government figures on paper banknotes, that's actually a relatively new phenomenon that we've come to accept in our lifetimes.
And remember, like the way our central banks actually operate today is something that was created in like the 1920s.
Yeah.
So it's like 100 years old.
Is that a lot?
I mean, not really, actually.
Your money for that.
Like, I don't know how long I'm going to be alive, but like, I mean, we're in the next 100 years right now. I mean, there could be a new money system that's being like created. Yeah.
Look, guys, I think what I'm going to do, because I feel very strongly that we just barely touched the surface of this topic. I think I have 3 great experts with me here today. I'd like to set up individual calls with each of you where we can go a little bit deeper on the things you're working on, your perspective, and learn more about stablecoins.
That's great.
Is that
Awesome.
okay? You guys up for that?
Yeah, totally up for it.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being here. I had a really great time speaking with you as a group, but I really look forward to speaking to you guys individually as well.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening and being here with me and my guests in this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Be sure, if you enjoyed this conversation, to like and subscribe wherever you heard or watched this podcast. And check us out on xd.academy to see some of the amazing courses and educational experiences that we've developed for you there. See you next time.